Hi everybody, Kate Richburg here, and I'm going to continue on my odyssey with these Fiesta earrings. And I'm going to start by soldering these skulls onto this back plate, and I've put the holes for the dangles that I'm going to add in the future on that back plate. And I'm also going to set these conchos on as well, and we're going to solder this whole thing with hard solder. I'm going to use paste solder for this operation here. And I'm going to start by spraying some cuprinol spray flux. It acts as a regular flux as well as a barrier flux, so it will help prevent fire scale on these pieces as well. So I'm going to start by adding my paste solder onto the back of these skulls, and if you'll remember, I have filed them, the skulls, so they're nice and flush. The join is nice and flush. There are two little places that I left as escape holes for the heat to come out. They're going to come out here. Here and here is the little bit of an opening to allow those fumes and everything to escape during the soldering process. Now I'm going to use paste solder, and this is hard solder. Now I know a lot of you don't use paste, but I use it actually quite often. I like using paste, but you can also sweat solder these. You can tin these with some hard solder as well, and then place them on and solder them again, solder them into place. But I like using paste solder for this operation. I think it kind of sticks where you put it, so it makes it nice and easy, simple to use. But you need to make sure that you are not using too much, because paste solder can get messy. So if you can see here, I'm going to put the rest of this, I'm holding it with my soldering tweezer. Let me see if I can grab it without disturbing, whoops, without disturbing any of my solder here, which it looks like I can't. So I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to extrude a little more of this paste solder. Sometimes I put it right there on my thumbnail. It's a good place to have it be a little staging area there. And the sizes, the little, I'm calling these pallions, but they're actually little dots of paste solder, but I'm treating them like pallions of regular metal solder, and placing them very judiciously right around the perimeter of the skull, all cheating in towards the inside of the skull. So when this flows, the solder is going to flow into one unbroken line. Now, paste solder has the solder already in it, along with some flux, but I always like that extra spray of flux. In my case, as I said, I use cuprinol, which is a great flux to use with paste. And I'm going to kind of drop this hopefully close to where I want it to be, and I'm going to use my tweezers to help position this perfectly just where I want it. And I check to make sure that all the join is flush and that I don't have any extra solder peeking out that's going to be messy. And there's a little bit, so I need to take it off there. I'll just use my tweezers to get that off. Paste solder just doesn't evaporate into the air. You need to make sure that if there's paste on the outside that you have removed it. I'm going to do the same thing with the hard solder to connect this piece, and then I'll do the same with this piece here and get them all ready, and I'm going to solder everything at the same time. Okay, we've got everything in place here. The conchos and the skulls are connected with paste solder, hard paste solder, and I've sprayed one more little misting of cuprinol. I just want to make sure that there's no extra paste solder oozing out from behind the skulls, because if it's not super clean, it's going to leave some solder on there that I have to clean up after things are soldered. So I'm going to fire up my butane torch, and we really need to think about heat control with this piece. Now remember, the skulls are thin metal, so they're thin. The peacock die, the back plate is big. That's the heat sink. That's going to be the biggest piece that has to get heated so that the solder flows. And then the concho, the solder joint is fairly small right there. So the heat of the metal, when I heat it, will cause the solder to flow. All right, so I'm going to heat this back plate, and I'm not even really going to heat much of it with the tip of my torch. I'm going to use my solderite board to help deflect the heat onto this piece. I'm really going to stay away from the skull, keeping my torch on, the torch flame on the skull, because I don't want to melt it. It's hollow inside as well, so it could easily melt and flatten down. So I'm going to heat as evenly as I can. I'm going to come in with the flame kind of further away, dry that flux, and then come in, heat that back plate, get that back plate up to temperature, then focus on these two pieces here, and hopefully everything will flow correctly if the solder gods are with me. So let's fire it up. I'm using just a simple butane torch here. Silver is very conductive, very easy to solder together, so a butane torch will do the job just fine. See how the piece is, the solder is smoking, and now the binder and the solder is catching fire, and so you just keep going through that flame and that smoke. And see how I'm heating the back plate of this, and I pop my torch up just a little. I'm avoiding that skull, getting the heat on that back plate. I'm watching that seam, and I can move that rotating pumice pan around a little bit to help me evenly distribute the heat. Can you see how the flux now is starting to look glassy, and I'm looking for that dull orange glow? As soon as I see that, and as soon as I see the little seal form around that skull, which I think I just saw that flash flow as we speak, it's going to be all set. Even heating, keeping that torch flame away, moving everything around. I think that's good to go. Now I'm going to go ahead and heat this one over here. Same thing's going to happen. I don't want to accidentally heat the other piece while I'm doing this one. So I'm heating that back plate using my solderite board to help deflect the heat. There we go, that joint on the concho just flowed, and there it went. The join around that skull just went as well. That's it. Now I'm going to let them sit for just a moment, and then I'm going to quench them. Notice how I was constantly moving my torch. I really kept an eagle eye on these pieces so I didn't melt them, but I did get that solder to flow. All right, time to quench and pickle. The pieces have now been quenched and pickled, and you can see they're nice and clean and ready for our next solder steps.